What you see is that you're able to really capture supply in a very unique way and then channel that consumption in a way that is representative of really the way that producers are creating that content. You can still have a one or two key winners within these different verticals. I think there's actually other verticals within content that have not been tapped yet. And I think that's in the combination of traditional media meets user-generated content.
Let's look at content. Platforms are winner take all. It's the name of the show. In the media world, though, we talk a lot about Netflix. We talk a lot about Disney Plus. We talk about these streaming. Everyone calls them streaming platforms. Let's call them streaming services. I like that name much better. There's no winner take all dynamic. You could have multiple winners. And the reason why is because the supply is actually very consolidated. So there isn't actually a lot of fragmentation, which means that there isn't a platform marketplace dynamic that you can capture all that supply. Why is supply so consolidated? Because it's actually very expensive to create these films and these really high-end production TV shows and episodes, and it costs a lot of money. So it's a lot harder to have kind of independent content creators footing the bill with the hope of getting like an ad revenue share or some kind of revenue share, based off of performance of your content. It's a much higher barrier to create that kind of content, which means it's much more consolidated than you would see for this thing called user-generated content. So in the world of user-generated content, that does have winner-take-all dynamics because it does have platform dynamics, but we need to think about user-generated content as actually existing in a bunch of different buckets. Let's think about what some of those different buckets are. There's a bunch of them, actually. Think about like people that are contributing long-form written content. Think about Wikipedia, user-generated content for an encyclopedia, basically. Think about blog posts, like a Medium, right? That's kind of the watering hole for blogging. Let's think about like user-generated content around places or restaurants or activities. TripAdvisor, Yelp. What about questions and just kind of general questions? Quora. They have even Stack Overflow, which is specialized around like engineering and coding questions, right? What about more kind of traditional media, photos and videos? Well, now you have short form content like Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. And Snapchat is kind of also has a very strong messaging and kind of chat communication dynamic as well. It's not so much as kind of a one-to-many maker model that we talk about, exchange platforms and maker platforms. I'd say Snapchat, the content distribution is actually much more exchange, where it's kind of one-to-one or one to a finite number of people that you're making and sharing content with, whereas it's much more one-to-many on the Instagram and TikTok. So, how are these network effects actually being captured? And that's where we need to think about from a winner-take-all dynamic, that these are very different businesses and are actually in very different markets. And you think about the users, the consumers, and the producers, and you can also see how it's very different, both from the type of content that's being created and from how people are connecting and sharing that information. Pinterest, it's kind of its own vertical of content platform with people pinning photos and different, recipes or information and kind of doing it around these different themes. Yes, you're creating, it's user generated, but the way it's organized and the way it's curated is very different from all these other ones. Is that going to be a mass general content platform? I don't think so. But can they go very deep into, say, shopping and monetizing the products that are now being pinned and curated? I actually think they've probably done less of a good job on that and going very deep into the niche that they own via the content platform than what the progress I see Instagram doing on shopping. I actually think Instagram shopping is doing a much better job than like Pinterest. Let's talk about social networks, user-generated content. Facebook. Oh, and then you have the professional version, LinkedIn, and then you have the gaming version, which like Blizzard is doing. So you can, have friend networks playing a bunch of different video games. We actually think there's room for a social network across every gaming platform. Epic is trying to do its own social network for on Epic games like Fortnite, right? But there actually isn't a social network that has hit scale across all the different video games. That's kind of, not manufacturer or video game creator specific, right? Owned by Blizzard or Epic, for example. Long form content, YouTube, streaming content, Twitch. Now you have Microsoft's Mixer that's getting into the game, right? So there are all these different content formats where there is overlap, but what you see is that you're able to really capture supply in a very unique way, and then channel that consumption in a way that is representative of really that initial piece of content that you're capturing, or the way that producers are creating that content. So, we see that basically in carving out all this own content, you can create content platforms that have a winner-take-all dynamic, but are still within their own industry. And there's some overlap, but you can still have a one or two key winners within these different verticals. I think there's actually other verticals within content that have not been tapped yet. And I think that's in the combination of traditional media meets user-generated content. And you're kind of seeing this in TikTok, where they now enable songs. Now you can kind of do videos and derivative content based upon these songs that they get the licensing rights for. And now you can make videos around that stuff, right? That's the tip of the iceberg. You kind of see that derivative content theme in SoundCloud, where you have kind of user-generated music that's now derivative or different, versions of music that's being created, right? You've seen this a little bit on the edges, this derivative content, but I think now you're going to be able to see that derivative content come into the video space. What happens if we were to open up these massive media libraries for all of these old, very popular TV shows and movies? What would happen if we could now enable that derivative content to be created and built on top of these very high-end video production? I think that's the next place you're going to see it. You could also see it on live TV. Or live sports, for example. I love watching Tony Romo commentate over football games. The guy can literally read the play that's about to happen and see it before it actually happens. But I would also love to pay $1 a month to listen to Barstool sports commentators commentate over football games as well, right? So derivative content on top of the traditional media asset of the football game. And Twitch actually tried this because Amazon gave them access to Thursday night NFL games. Twitch now let people like Ninja, when Ninja was still on Twitch, to commentate. And he had over 100,000 people watching him at the peak. Now you're watching the football game live, but in the little pip screen, you've got Ninja. And then Ninja's putting his commentary over the football game. That's exactly the kind of stuff that we have yet to really see, is the traditional media and the user-generated content, and how these two things come together in the form of what I would call kind of user-generated derivative content on top of that traditional media content. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.